You ever wake up one morning and somebody announces with the polite cruelty of a power-suited person that they're going to cut a pipeline through your backyard and then act like you asked for it? That was me standing on my porch, coffee in one hand, blood in my family's paper-thin deeds, and a woman in heels telling me, "Mr. Holloway, our pipeline cuts straight through your land. Deal with it." Yeah, that was the hook. You think I'm kidding, I wish I were. My name is Marcus Holloway, and 6 months ago my biggest worry was keeping Danny Rodriguez from power sanding his remaining fingers down to nubs. Danny is one of a dozen men who show up at my barn 3 times a week, disabled veterans, all of them bandaged histories and brittle jokes trying to make sense of what's left of their hands by turning wood into something with edges. That workshop sits on 3 acres. My grandmother Rose left me a farmhouse with honest bones, a converted barn that smells like sawdust and honeysuckle, a well that's been pumping since Truman was president. It's quiet out there in a way that heals you if you let it, which is why what landed on my porch felt like a grenade. Vivian Blackthorne pulled up in a white BMW at 8 a.m., all corporate armor and click-clack heels, a walking announcement that the world outside my land had already written me off. "Mr. Holloway," she said, smile like a closed fist, "we're here about your utility easement." She produced a stack of papers with county seals and lawyerly fonts and watched me the way predators watch prey that's pretending to be awake. According to her, the community needed a pipeline essential infrastructure and the easement covered everything. If you've toured war zones, you learn a sixth sense for bullshit. There are smells, hesitations, details that don't line up. Her perfume hit me like chemical warfare. The map she unfolded had red lines that sliced straight through my workshop and worse, the places my guys had built with their hands. "This helps disabled veterans," I said. "That's your hobby," she shot back. "You should get real jobs." The hammering in the workshop stopped. Danny stood in the doorway with his prosthetic and looked at her like she'd spit on his mother. She didn't blink. 72 hours is a small window until it becomes a long, loud war. Papers showed up taped to my door, injunctions notices from a slick downtown law firm saying construction started Monday unless I prepare for access. The neighborhood newsletter printed an op-ed calling me selfish, claiming the community's water and safety were at risk. Neighbors started glancing at me like I'd brought plague. Stakes showed up in frozen ground. A survey crew drove bright orange markers across my property while Vivian pointed at my barn like she was planning a demolition party. Then the county inspector arrived. Dale Hoffman, clipboard swinging like a medieval mace. He found 100 ways my workshop was a hazard, none of them grounded in reality, all of them convenient. "Unlicensed commercial activity," he said. "Fire hazard." I recorded everything. Georgia is a one-party consent state. Recording keeps the bullies honest. While Hoffman scribbled, my research found a $5,000 payment from Willowbrook Management Company to Hoffman's account safety consulting, they called it. That was my first full cold sip of suspicion. The week unfolded like a play we hadn't auditioned for. I learned the inspector had shut down a woman named Elena Rodriguez's workshop before she lost her house to foreclosure. I learned 10 minutes later that the timing lined up with payments. When all 12 veterans watched that story connect like a series of landmines, the silence in my barn felt like grief. Then Tommy, who lost both legs in Kandahar and still calls me Sarge out of habit, laughed. Not a bitter laugh, but a knowing one. "They think we're broken," he said. "They don't know we were built for this." Lucky for us, sloppy corruption makes mistakes. On the first morning of heavy machinery, excavators and backhoes and guys who looked like they learned to coordinate in county lockup. One of the operators clipped my water line. Pressurized water hissed into red clay, and as the flood receded, concrete structures appeared, old engineered foundations, not on any modern map. Survey markers that belonged to an older world. Foundations that suggested a water collection system massive enough to change the math on every development in the valley. A phone call from Danny led to Elena, and Elena brought a faded photograph of her grandmother standing next to a concrete wellhead that matched what the excavators had unburied. My grandmother's old stories about water rights weren't folklore. They were a breadcrumb trail. We started digging through courthouse boxes that smelled like dust and time, and what we found made my jaw ache. Geological surveys from the 1940s pointed to Holloway Farm as a primary collection point. Permits from the 1980s showed Willowbrook had never connected to municipal water like they claimed they'd been drawing directly from an aquifer tied to my land through a private outfit called Clearwater Municipal Services. And then the signature on the ownership papers hit me like a punch. Vivian Blackthorne through a shell company, the fake water company that had been charging municipal rates and paying nothing for water rights. A profit margin built on theft. Documents showed a deliberate pattern: identify families with legitimate water claims, manufacture violations, force foreclosures, erase the records that could prove the theft. Elena's house had been condemned right after she tried to use her family's records. Records had disappeared during digitization. The conspiracy smelled like greed and had been cooking for decades. Here's where desperation becomes opportunity. Clearwater was hemorrhaging money debt so bad the company was a few months from bankruptcy. Elena had the accounting sense to see the numbers. Bellamy, a corporate attorney she knew, saw the legal path. Jake Morrison, a friend, had the engineering tools to map the underground network. We hatched a plan that felt like a military campaign without bullets. Buy Clearwater, take ownership of the infrastructure, and then do what those thieves never would: run it honestly and use it to rebuild what they'd broken. We sold everything that wasn't nailed down. I drove a Honda while my grandmother's antiques walked out to estate sales. Elena handled the finances like a priest handling relics. Bellamy handled the legal filings. I handled the stubborn logistics. For 3 weeks we mapped pipes, dug through records, and raised money. It felt improbable, but we filed the acquisition paperwork and the State Utility Commission gave us tentative approval pending resolution of the federal investigation that was about to start. Vivian's panic got theatrical. She produced court papers claiming I had exhibited erratic behavior, a psychiatric evaluation attempt, the kind of move that reveals someone who thinks they can make problems disappear with paperwork and threats. County officials started making emergency declarations claiming public safety to wrest control of Clearwater before our acquisition closed. It was elegant in its audacity: manufacture an emergency report, use it to seize control, appoint yourself as overseer, and extinguish anyone who'd point to your fingerprints. We found payments, lots of them. Consulting fees disguised flowing between Vivian's shell companies and county administrators. That's federal territory: bribery, conspiracy, mail fraud, deprivation of civil rights under color of law. When Elena spread the paper trail across my kitchen table, I called the FBI. That call changed everything. Vivian escalated. Someone's sugar in Elena's gas tank. Anonymous tips. Break-ins that failed. Threats via henchmen in black SUVs. Kruger, an expensive lawyer with a briefcase of cash, showed up and offered settlements, meaning pay us and forget what you've seen. He threatened Elena like the world could be bought with a neatly stacked bundle. They'd moved from white-collar theft into intimidation and felonies. They'd left a paper trail even their favorite county attorneys couldn't erase. The FBI arrived with women and men professional enough to make crooked county halls sweat. Forensic accountants, public corruption specialists, the works. Within hours, they'd seized computers, bank records, evidence of bribes. Vivian's empire began to crumble on the very spreadsheets she thought would hide it. She tried one last move: threaten us into silence, and in doing so, she handed the federal agents the evidence of witness tampering. It was poetic. Criminals love to threaten when they think the law is local. Federal law is less impressed by small-town intimidation. When the State Utility Commission approved our acquisition, it felt like sunlight after months of storms. Then came the meeting, the big HOA gathering where Vivian planned to sell herself as the savior of the neighborhood. 300 people showed up, more than any HOA meeting should ever have, and she stood at the podium with a polished slideshow about water shortages and public safety, turning her theft into civic virtue. I stood up, walked to the front, and demonstrated something simple. I pressed a button. Sprinklers stopped. Faucets went dry. 300 people realized in real time their water had been supplied by the company we'd just bought. Agent Rodriguez, the FBI agent who'd become a friend in this mess, announced the investigation. Vivian's face went white. Her slides, her speeches, her perfumed authority, all of it dissolved into the sound of handcuffs. Vivian Blackthorne, you're under arrest for conspiracy, bribery, and deprivation of civil rights. She heard over the roar of people learning they'd been robbed while being told they were cared for. What followed was bureaucratic slow justice and fast public catharsis. Vivian got 7 years. Hoffmans and the corrupt inspectors got sentences proportionate to their cowardice. Restitution returned millions to families. Elena got her grandmother's house back. We turned Clearwater into a legitimate public-serving utility, cut rates, invested in infrastructure, and created the Holloway Rodriguez Veterans Water Initiative, training disabled vets to maintain and manage water systems. Tommy became the maintenance supervisor. Danny runs customer relations. Guys who used to come to the barn to remember how to be human now have paychecks, benefits, and pride. If you want the moral lesson, and I do, I promised you one, here it is. The best revenge isn't blowing people up or ruining them for sport. It's taking what they built on theft and making it so honest and useful that everyone can see the difference. Build something so much better than what they created that your victory is obvious and restorative. Power that's hoarded and hidden will always rot. Power that's handed to people who deserve it heals. So here's the question I want you to wrestle with, and yeah, I want to read your stories. When the people in your town tell you a project is for community safety, do you dig and ask who profits? When a local leader says, "Trust me, who is watching the books? Tell me your HOA nightmare or your small-town corruption story," did you fight back, walk away, or get swallowed by it? And if you did fight, what did you build afterward? Share it, because sometimes the best map through a mess is someone else's footsteps.